Hello and welcome to Straight Talk with me, Sifiso Mahlangu. Today I have the spokesperson of the ANC, Mr. Zizi Kodwa. We have a lot to attach to this conversation. Judicial overreach, FW de Klerk speaking at this national dialogue, and the attempt of no confidence. Mhlekazi, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a lot to talk to you about today, but particularly the judicial overreach. You say the courts are playing in the political periphery. Why would they want President Jacob Zuma to provide reasons to why he changed his cabinet, why he reshuffled his cabinet? Why do you say the judge is biased? Let's start there.
No, I think firstly, let's just give broadly why the architects of our constitution, those who drafted the foresight they had of a constitutional democracy in the new South Africa, and the need to have what is called the doctrine of separation of power, the three arms of state, and why they must exist independent of one another to avoid what we call now judicial overreach. Firstly is that the appointment of the Deputy President of the Republic, the ministers, the Deputy Ministers, it derives from the Constitution. That is in Section 91.2 of the Constitution, and the President is also allowed to do so and give them functions and roles. At the same time, he may dismiss them. It's a political function. It's political in the sense that there is no criteria of requirement of who and how must appoint on the basis of what. Because it arises from the fact that we live in our democracy and constitutional democracy is based on a political system. It's a political party that wins, and therefore that's why in the appointment, in exercising that political function, precisely because the decision, it is political. Even the reshuffling as well as the appointment, sometimes a reshuffling is not done because somebody has done anything wrong. You can be reshuffled for having not done anything wrong, but for political reasons, to strengthen the capacity to move Zizi to another portfolio, because you might have been doing well in the current portfolio, you can do better in another portfolio. And that movement is not explained. It has never been done before. So when the judge says the president must give reasons on a political decision, on a political consideration, he is now encroaching on the political decisions of the executive, particularly of the president. But you must remember also, he says as part of the reasons which are more political, he says because the decision to reshuffle in that fateful night, he says there was a consternation in the public, there was amusement, there was amazement, there was a shock. Those are political considerations. So he's venturing into a political discourse. He's considering political opinion as part of his reasoning. Judge or a court should not do so, because immediately you do so, you are encroaching into political space. If judges, for example, say there was a public outcry.
But Mr. Kodwa, wouldn't you agree that the judge's decision is informed by the various voices that came even out of the ANC? Your Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, said what the president has done is unacceptable. So how do you expect that society and even the courts would assume that the president's decision was consulted and the president's rationale was accounted for?
There is no court that has got some instinctively. It must think because of one or two persons or people from the same organization.
Ms. Jessie Duarte sat on the seat you're sitting in and said that they knew about the cabinet reshuffle in 2016. And she was amazed why people were commenting the way they were commenting to various media houses. Many pretended that they did not know there was going to be a cabinet reshuffle.
That is not...
Later in the week, Mr. Mantashe hosted a press conference after the NWC meeting and said the relationship between Mr. Pravin Gordhan and President Zuma had broken down and even made a simile to a divorce. So surely they knew that there was going to be a reshuffle. My point is maybe the array of voices and some backstabbing, if I can call it that, within members of the ANC has informed the courts that even the ANC, the top six, were not aware or were not in accord with the cabinet reshuffle.
No, that is not an area of judges. That is not an area of the court. when the court makes any ruling or it were to make any determination based on law, assuming that the decision of irrationality was based on any article in law, it's not an area of a judge to consider who said what in public, whether it's a deputy president, whether it's a PA to the president, whether how close that person to the president, whether it's a collective, is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that when a court takes a decision, it can consider what will regard it as political decision. You can't prove any rationality. It can't be on the basis of people were divided, came in public, and therefore showed or displayed public disunity. It has got nothing to do with the court. The fact is, president appointment of deputy president, the ministers, is a political decision. And that decision, that's why sometimes it is not explained to even the people who are shifted from positions, because it has no criteria or requirement that you must be a minister of finance because you must be a minister of social development because you have done the following. That's why even people, when they are asked, you don't need honors on some of the deployments, because there is no specific requirement, both in terms of the law and the constitution. That decision is constitutional. And therefore, within our view, judicial overreach to this extent is where the judge simply take a political view and uses the court, the bench.
So you're putting it on the record that this judge works for the DA?
The fact that he agrees, I mean, it was very clear that that is the reasons provided. One, two, the ruling itself, it is political. It agrees with what was presented by the Democratic Alliance. Secondly, clearly in terms of the judge's reasoning, he endorses what we will call politically co-governance. That for any president to take any decision, he must co-govern, or she must co-govern with the opposition. It doesn't happen.
Mr. Kodwa, you know, with that narrative, it would make it very difficult for South Africans to trust the courts, because it looks like, well, first of all, there's no transformation in the courts and simply no fairness in the courts for that matter. If you're suggesting that the judge works for the DA or the judge represents the DA narrative. So should South Africans be worried by your statement?
We shouldn't, by one incident, just put everybody, the judiciary, in one brush, that all judges, all benches are the same. Let's deal with one incident. And that incident, if that incident is an epitome or is the tip of the iceberg, that is something else. We think that we have done well to transform the judiciary, but I think the institution, the institutional memory and everything else, those are the things that to some extent the institutional attitude hasn't changed. If you can have a judge like him, Judge Valley, clearly Judge Valley has an opinion, his view is informed by public opinion. And the public opinion, he talks about, for an example, that there was a perception in public that removing the Minister of Finance and his deputy because they were fighting corruption. That has got nothing to do with the issues of the court. That's public opinion. He's venturing already the issues that in the public discourse. And I'm not saying he works for DA, but he agrees with the argument because his reasoning that they provided are now in line with, informed by what is in the public discourse. And the judges should always stay above, must be above reproach when it comes to their reason, because courts are final arbiters. This is where even the most difficult decisions are tested in law, whether they are right or wrong. And therefore, if judges themselves, they venture into public opinion and political space, this judge has become a politician, for example.
What does that say about the other ministers who are axed? You know, Ms. Jomat Peterson, Ms. Dipuo Peters. But it seems like there is a narrative that is painted by the media and often the courts also in this country that Mr. Pravin Gordhan and Mr. Mcebisi Jonas are irreplaceable. Are you fearful of that narrative?
The danger, again, I mean, the Judge Valley should have asked this question. Why is it we're only talking about two people who were removed and reshuffled, and yet
when there's many others
there was many of them, and there's precedents, not only once. President Zuma since 2009 has reshuffled and appointed new people for so many reasons, and some of those reasons were not even explained to the party. It's not our space to ask why. These are decisions, are political decisions of the president. Precisely the reason that confirms our view that perhaps the judge himself has got a view publicly, politically, in terms of what had happened. You should have asked this correct question you're asking. Why are you bringing this application about only two people, and yet the president sacked an appointment and moved so many people?
Okay. Mr. Kodwa, I want to turn my attention to last week where Mr. F.W. de Klerk, Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, And former President Thabo Mbeki sat in a dialogue. It was called the National Dialogue. It only represented the three of them. Then Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, she was the deputy president when then Deputy President Jacob Zuma was axed. And she made a Skype telecast of sort and spoke. What does that say to the party when Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, former President Thabo Mbeki, sit on the same panel with apartheid boss F.W. de Klerk and discuss democracy and non-racialism?
F.W. de Klerk knows nothing about democracy. He knows nothing about non-racialism. And I think such credible leaders of the ANC to share such credible platform to discuss challenges facing this country 23 years into democracy with somebody responsible with the mess that we're dealing with today is quite unfortunate and regrettable, because it gave him, he became emboldened that himself he has transformed. He can talk about some of the challenges as though they started after him, F.W. de Klerk, and yet he's responsible for the mess we're dealing with. If you see the ugly head of racism that continues to raise its ugly head today, among others, comes from the man who himself was the last the president of apartheid state, who represented minority and who represented the social engineered policy of racism in this country. It was quite unfortunate that our leaders could share such a platform with F.W. de Klerk. That's why he made comments he made about our leaders, whatever, notwithstanding the weaknesses inherently that we may have as leaders of the African National Congress. But the last person to talk about non-racialism and democracy, and even to an extent that we may criticize the weaknesses of the current leadership, is F.W. de Klerk.
But you know, Mr. Kodwa, it seems like this is not just a national dialogue. It couldn't have been a national dialogue because there was just three men on the panel sitting in an auditorium. I don't believe that's a national debate. But this is the former president who was axed by the ANC, Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, who was beaten or defeated at the elective conference by President Jacob Zuma. Don't you think this is a gathering of the anti-Zuma movement, or it's a gathering of people who want to rewrite their political obituary? Isn't this an anti-Zuma gathering? If it wasn't, why do they not invite Ms. Baleka Mbete, who had a longer tenure as the deputy president of this country than Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka? I have it on record that the Jacob Zuma Foundation was not invited to speak as other foundations were. So it really seems like this is an anti-Zuma gathering rather than a national dialogue.
South Africa and its challenges must not be all, we must not understand them as though they are only around President Zuma. So we're discussing about challenges we face. For an example, the problem we face today is protest all over Gauteng. And we can't be talking about President Zuma there. Let's discuss the problems. And I don't think we must have a conspiracy that everything that does not include the president, therefore, is anti-president. President Zuma, in the principles and democratic processes of the ANC, those who contested have accepted that he is now the president. He's not contested. Nobody's contested.
Mr. Kodwa, I don't think many of the leaders have accepted that defeat. Former President Thabo Mbeki wanted a third term as president. He axed President Zuma, appointed Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka as deputy president. When he was beaten, he did not accept that President Zuma was the president of the ANC. When the ANC axed him, there was an array of other ministers, including the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Trevor Manuel, who quit because Mr. Thabo Mbeki had been recalled. There is some bad blood between these two gentlemen.
We need to say it on record that both President Kgalema and President Mbeki have on different occasions expressed their acceptance of the fact that President Zuma is the president of the ANC. When President Mbeki, for example, and President Kgalema attend the State of the Nation address, they attend the State of the Nation address to be addressed by President Zuma. Whether there are feelings about what we think, that is something else. And I don't think we must shoot down any initiative where it talks about it takes South Africa forward.
But Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe said he does not think that he will be voting for the ANC.
Again,
I don't know if that makes him an ANC member then.
Both of them, they remain members of the ANC in good standing. Whether what they say in public is in line with policies of the ANC, that is something that the ANC can always. They've got space and platform in the ANC. They've got a 6th floor or a 10th floor in the ANC, which are most important floors in the ANC where they can come and meet the leadership. But I don't think we must engage with them with suspicion that they no longer represent, they are not members of the ANC. But the fact that there was de Klerk, which was an important part, is that perhaps it gave credibility to what, in our view, would have been embraced if there's a shortcoming, for example, in the organizing of the what is called national dialogue. Let's talk about it. To what an extent national dialogue is national when it has got 3 foundations? Is there a cutting perspective of these 3 foundations in which they agree about where South Africa must go? Why they are assuming that other foundations will not agree with them? Was it a start? Or is there a perspective that they will further open up to other foundations? Where is it going? How does it relate to the national project of national reconciliation, social cohesion, and so on? Is it in line with our objective of the National Democratic Society and NDP? These are the things that we will not know because even that initiative has not been presented to the ANC. That's why we don't want to interact with it on the basis of a suspicion and conspiracy. Let's deal with it politically, but politically we're already making an observation that de Klerk abused that platform to give credibility to himself, a credibility that it does not deserve. He suffered defeat from the masses.
But Mr. Kodwa, it was the ANC that made F.W. de Klerk the deputy president.
When we attained political power, we knew what needed to be done. Of immediate was national reconciliation, was overarching project of the African National Congress.
One writer said to me last week, why are we concerned that Mr. F.W. de Klerk is the speaker at the so-called national dialogue when the ANC absorbed Martinus van Schalkwyk as a minister, when the ANC absorbed Peter Mulder as a deputy minister? Why shouldn't de Klerk speak?
It must not stop us from criticizing what de Klerk represents. De Klerk represents evil, represents apartheid, represents crime against humanity. Because the system that he was a president of was declared by United Nations as a crime against humanity. So when we talk about the crimes of apartheid, what it has done to our people, including the fact that we are dealing with inequality in this country, he's responsible. So when we give him a platform and actually espouse him as one of the leaders who brought democracy in this country, we are misleading South Africa. That is the point we're making. As whether the ANC, as part of its strength and hegemony in society, it was able to lead even those that were opposed to the ANC to join the ANC, that is something else. Because that's what the ANC does. As a mass-based organization, it must lead even those, alliance of those who oppose the ANC. It must shred the base of the enemy. Make sure that the base of the enemy is eroded and the base of the ANC is increased. That is the responsibility of the ANC.
It is Mr. F.W. de Klerk who has dominated your opinion of the national debate. But even Mr. Thabo Mbeki doesn't attend the January 8 event. He doesn't campaign for the ANC. Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe says he doesn't believe whether he'll vote for the ANC in the upcoming elections. How do you then say, Mr. Kodwa, that these 2 former presidents are ANC members in good standing?
President Kgalema has not missed, for an example, any of the meetings of the ANC where he's invited. Every time we get a report, he was in a branch meeting. He sits not as a leader, but as a branch member. That's Kgalema, member of the ANC in good standing. So what people say, it must not create a suspicion and this anxiety that all of a sudden we push them away from being members of the ANC. Former president of the ANC, they've got a right in terms of the constitution of the ANC. They can sit in the executive, like President Mbeki. He chose not to. We don't know the reasons, but like we always do, we extend the invite for the former president to attend all the meetings of the ANC, whether you're talking about the January 8th meetings. He chose not to attend those meetings. We can't say what reasons because he has not provided, even the ANC, what he's not attending those meetings.
One said last week that the people are asking for land, but it seems like we are returning de Klerk back to them. What collectively as the ANC, or what measures are you going to take, perhaps to impede Mr. de Klerk from acting as the Messiah you say he claims to be?
No, he can share, those who share with him, they can share a platform with him. We don't share the vision and the perspective both of Mr. de Klerk and his foundation. They are clear, their view is to continue to embrace inequality, to embrace racism in this country, to make sure that our people of Soweto, people of Kwamashu and so on, they remain impoverished. That's what he represents. And our view when we say we adopted radical economic transformation, obviously he can't espouse that. When we tell we must change the structure, the control and the management of the economy, he can't embrace that. He embraces the fact that 70% of the economy is still in the hands of white males. That's what he embraces. We can't share any perspective. We can't endorse him. If there are people who share a platform with him, we'll engage with him ideologically. And I don't think we must run away. That's why platforms such as this, we must say we don't share his perspective because he represents the enemy. That's why we must close ranks so that we don't give them platforms where they must mislead our people as the messiahs who brought us freedom.
Mr. Kodwa, the vote of no confidence or the attempt to have a vote of no confidence against President Jacob Zuma is coming up within the National Assembly. Are you fearful of the results that sitting might present?
In Parliament, we have we sent one of the advanced detachment of the ANC, the most tried and tested leaders. We call them members of Parliament. We have no reason, not an inch, to doubt that their conscience will only be the African National Congress. So when people talk about conscience of members of the ANC, they think that conscience must be to agree with opposition. No, these are tried and tested leaders, members coming from branches.
And you trust them?
We have no reason not to trust them.
For that matter, why don't you want them to have an open vote or a public vote?
No, you recall even the ANC is not party to the case in court. It is Parliament versus opposition. Even the Speaker of Parliament says in her affidavit that she is not opposed, but the rules of Parliament does not allow. It's simply the rules of Parliament.
President Thabo Mbeki said the ANC should allow people to vote with their conscience and not vote on party lines.
Well,
former president
that is strange because as far back as 1997, it was him who said, among others, leaders and members of the ANC in Parliament cannot vote in their conscience, suggesting that therefore they cannot vote with the opposition because it's not done anywhere in the world in a party-based system where members are now deployed as members representing a party. Suddenly, they transmogrify, they become independent of the party. It doesn't happen anyway. It's unheard of. Even the opposition. That's why even EFF, during the local government elections, those who were, during the voting, they had to show the EFF that they are voting with the Democratic Alliance, some of the names that were suggested. So it's unheard of. Conscious does not mean vote with the opposition. Conscious, in our view, says you must remain.
This is not the first attempt to have a vote of no confidence against President Zuma. There's been many others and the others have failed. For how long shall this continue? Mr. Melusi Kwikaba said to us last week, there's no way in hell that this vote of no confidence will succeed. Do you think that the Constitution has got many loopholes that are now triggering against the ANC? Those loopholes are now attacking the ANC. If we have to bring Judge Valley into this, now, you know, the attempts of vote of no confidence, timelessly over and over again. I think this shows that perhaps when this constitution was designed, it opened many, many loopholes for the opposition or even apartheid bosses to come back and assault democracy.
No, we must not be irritated by individuals. In a constitutional democracy, which allows plurality of views, we must not, in response to that, seek to create authoritarian or a dictatorship. And I think whilst individuals may irritate us, we must always remember that we are a law-based society, to quote now President Mbeki. That we must remember that we must always understand that we are governed in terms of the rule of law. We must always respect the independence of the judiciary, including the other arms of state. So we must not be irritated. When you ask me a question whether how many times should we allow the vote of no confidence, look, it's like asking me how many times should we allow Boswell, like suckers. As long as the African National Congress remains a majority in Parliament, we shouldn't be worried about how many times. It's part of exercising of democracy. Remember, it is not, if it were to succeed, it is not on the basis of the strength of the opposition. That's why they continue, when they put it on the table in Parliament, their hope is that it is on the weaknesses of the majority party. So they will never win it. So we must not be irritable because of actions of opposition. We must remain steadfast. We must respect the Constitution. We must uphold the Constitution as African National Congress. And we must not be seen in response to some of this irritation. No attempt must be out of irritation. We must amend the Constitution because we are the ones who brought this Constitution. If there are certain things that are not working in this Constitution, it must be things that take South Africa forward.
Mr. Kodwa, my final question for you today is, were you guaranteed the president's safety and that people would not boo him and insult him at the May Day rally?
The decision of the officials was that we will consider all the invites we received and we will go and attend the deployment as according to the deployment of the ANC. However, we anticipate that there will be certain actions, certain things that will happen in some of those meetings, whether including heckling and so on. That we anticipated is a decision of the officials, 6 of them. Friday preceding Monday, which is the May Day, officials met with COSATU officials to say, give us your observations. What will happen on Monday? We were guaranteed, firstly, that the programs will go ahead as planned. 2, of course, COSATU as well, they did anticipate certain things. Look, we do anticipate. But from our point of view of the ANC, the national leadership of the ANC carries a heavy responsibility to convey the key message on behalf of the ANC. It is quite regrettable and sad that in Bloemfontein and Polokwane in particular, that our leaders were not able to convey and deliver a message on behalf of the ANC. Do you think the president
was betrayed by leaders of COSATU and SACP?
The biggest disturbance of what happened in Bloemfontein is not President Zuma. It's the fact that even workers could not allow their own president.
Yeah. I think the insult was primarily to workers before anybody else.
Primarily, you must understand, people think that it was meant for President Zuma. The fact that they could not even allow President Zuma, their own president, it's a setback, because that is a person who represents them.
What does this mean for the alliance?
What it means others, we must close ranks. That's why it's important that there are certain things, even if we disagree about one another, we must always talk to one another. For an example, we must not talk about the leadership of one alliance partner and talk about it in public. It becomes a public stand because our members as this alliance are listening and therefore they may react in a particular way. So it means as alliance, this time around, there is no way that we must be reckless about one another. We must close the ranks. Unity is sacrosanct of the alliance. We must talk about the future of the alliance because without a united alliance, we can't talk about national democratic revolution because it needs all of us.
Mr. Zizi Kodwa, I thank you for coming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I hope we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
It is indeed true that the ranks must be closed and unity may come. Whether or not it will come, in fact, before 2019 is entirely another story. With politicians, you know and believe that the story changes. In South Africa, we say a week is very long for politics. I'm Sifiso Matlang. This is Straight Talk. Pray for South Africa. Good night and see you soon.